Good evening. On this Earth Day, millions of Americans in the communities which dot this map have taken the first step to survival. But if this day of teach-ins, mock funerals, rallies, marches, speeches, and songs does not convince enough of us that the threat to our life on Earth is clear and present, then we may have cast a vote for death.
Welcome to this special episode of Amusing Jews, where we celebrate Jewish contributors and contributions to American popular culture. With Earth Day upon us, we thought it would be a keen idea to explore the holiday with someone who was there at the beginning. I'm Jonathan Friedmann.
And I'm Joey Angelfield.
Producer-engineer Mike Tomren is working somewhere behind the scenes. Amusing Jews is a project of Adat Chaverim, Congregation for Humanistic Judaism, the Cool Shul Jewish Cultural Community, and Atheists United Studios.
Our special guest today is Nancy Pearlman, an award-winning broadcaster and environmentalist who has dedicated her career to protecting the planet's ecosystems. She organized the first Earth Day in Southern California in 1970, has hosted the Environmental Directions radio show since 1977, and has produced the ECONEWS television program since 1984. She also directs the nonprofit Educational Communications. Nancy, welcome to Amusing Jews.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here on planet Earth. We haven't destroyed it yet.
You've been an environmentalist for over 50 years. What initially drew you to environmentalism?
I credit my parents for bringing me to the mountains when I was a child. Beautiful nature. And it really warms my heart to see the wildlife, wild, not in the captivity in a zoo. And then when I was in college, I traveled the world. I went around the world on a ship, and it was incredible to see different environments, different cultures, different people. I majored in anthropology with an environmental studies specialty, and I saw what was going on in many different places in the world. And I simply had a love of nature, a love of people, caring about nature. Because quite frankly, the animals and plants don't speak for themselves. We have to go to the public hearings and testify and be sure that they get the protections. And I also was drawn to activism because of my parents. They were very much social liberal people who wanted to make society better, to give back, and to help people as well as the other creatures on the planet. And so I took the activism from them, and I took my anti-war activism from the Vietnam War. And we organized the first environmental teach-in. We called it that because they were having anti-war teach-ins. And Earth Day was a week-long affair. It wasn't just one day. And of course, really, it's a lifelong affair for me. And so I have been engaged in one capacity or another in many different organizations, with many different groups, with many different individuals. But I truly believe that it's important that everybody get out in nature, because the studies have shown that if we are just connected to the computer, which is wonderful to have, but we need to also feel the earth and the plants and the animals.
As mentioned, you organized the first Earth Day in Southern California in 1970. April 22nd, 1970 was the first Earth Day ever. How did you get involved with that?
I was attending the University of California at Los Angeles, and I joined a student club. And they said, oh, we should do something. There's a Earth Day. Now, there are people who get credit for it. Senator did it in Congress, and there was a national organization. But quite frankly, the national organization did nothing more than send us buttons, bumper stickers, and posters. We did all the grassroots leveling. And back then, it wasn't commercialized. We didn't have the sponsorship of companies who were trying to either be green or greenwash their activities. We were citizens, and we put out the card tables, and we handed out the literature, and we got petitions signed to stop the SST, the supersonic transport plane, and to stop a development in Mineral King that Disney wanted to make a ski resort, which is in Middle King in the Sierra Mountains, which is now a national park. Fortunately, we saved it. We didn't save everything. We've been fighting for decades to save Bayona wetlands. We lost 3/4 of it. Amigos de Bolsa Chica was working to save the Bolsa Chica and the Huntington Beach. Mojave Desert, we tried to save that and create a national park. We got a national preserve. We tried to expand the Joshua Tree. Santa Monica Mountains, we organized 1,000 people on Mulholland Boulevard and to protest the fact that there was too much development in the mountains and we wanted a national park. We didn't succeed, but we did get a national recreation area, and some areas have been saved. In fact, one of my first Emmy-nominated specials, PBS specials, was Jam in the Heart of the City, about the Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area and Rim of the Valley Corridor. But going back, I also must say it's very important that people read. I was attending UCLA. I took a biology class. It was required. It wasn't my specialty. But there was a little book called The Population Bomb by Dr. Paul Ehrlich. And I read that book. And that changed my whole perception. At that time, we had about 2 billion people on the planet. We have over 8 billion now. We've gone beyond the carrying capacity. If we controlled our population on a voluntary basis, then everybody could be fed, have health care, have education, have food, have clothing, have housing. But people didn't listen. And I read that book, and there was one, it was really in the opening chapter. He talked about an airplane. Yeah, an airplane can fly, and we know about these airplanes flying and what's breaking off. One rivet too many, and then collapse. And that really hit me hard, that we can keep adding people, but at what standard of living? And what are we doing to the ecosystem? So I think it's really important that people read some of this information. And I've been privileged in the years that I've been doing my radio and TV show to interview some of these experts, people like Jane Goodall and Carl Sagan and Paul Ehrlich and the father of human ecology, Dr. Darren Harden, and all these people who've done incredible work pointing out that we must do more. And they've written incredible books that I recommend everybody watch and listen and read.
Enjoying the show? Click like and subscribe.
I've also read that if everyone on planet Earth were to consume at the rate and level as Americans do, we would need 2 or 3 more planet Earths.
This is a major problem. When I traveled, I was really stunned when I saw people dying, living, starving in different places in the cities on the streets. Now we have homelessness on our streets. One of the things that is so significant is that we cannot carry on the level that we have been doing, because Americans use so much more energy, so many more resources, and that means other people and animals and plants suffer. And I did my 3rd Emmy-nominated special was overpopulation in the United States. But it was hard to show because, you're showing Beverly Hills, the wealth, all the wonderful things that everybody wants to accomplish. It doesn't look bad. Everybody wants that. But that consumption, that consumerism is destructive. It's so much easier to show overpopulation where people don't have the resources, but it is here in the United States, and we do have to reduce our consumption and get into that triple R, the reduce, reuse, recycle. Recycle is really last. We shouldn't be using so much.
How has Earth Day evolved since those early years? I'm assuming its focus has changed as the environmental crisis has accelerated and taken on new dimensions.
When I thought about Earth Day then and it's coming up now, I always think, what has changed, what hasn't? Sadly, it's gotten worse. And one of the big differences in the 70s, it was environment versus economy. In other words, the businesses did not accept it. We couldn't even get into the schools because they considered us very radical. And of course, now everybody wants to say they're doing something for the environment. I don't like the current Earth Days from the last 20 years or so because the organizers charge citizen groups, activist groups, to have a table, to have material to distribute to others. And the commercial operations and the commercial sponsorship is really sad because they are promoting it for themselves, but they're not giving it to the nonprofits. My nonprofit organization, founded in 1958, has never received a dime from these companies. Another major change that I don't like is the fact that environmentalists are afraid to tackle the real essence of the problem, and that's overpopulation. It's become a taboo subject. They are afraid now. We weren't afraid back in 1970. In the 70s, we spoke out about it. But now, people are afraid to talk about it. And it has nothing to do with your race, your religion, or any of that. It has to do with human beings. We're Homo sapiens. We're all one. And overpopulation applies to everybody. And yet people are afraid because they're going to be accused of being a racist. They're going to be accused of not caring about people when we care about animals. It's the other way around. If anybody has seen that circle of life, that you realize we're all interconnected. We can't take out the major predators, whether or not it's the wolves. We can't take out the whales. We can't take out any of the major predators because they keep the other animals in balance. And this concept is not really being explored and discussed. The other thing that's absolutely horrible is that we haven't solved the extinction problem. When I started speaking in 1970, it was 5 to 10 species a day are becoming extinct. I would have thought by now I wouldn't be saying we still have 5 to 10 species a day becoming extinct. That's not improvement. And we also have massive amount of plastics. The plastic problem has totally gone out of reach. And it's taking so long for the governmental agencies and the businesses to make the transition to non-plastics. We don't need one-use plastic bags. There are alternatives, but yet they're still there. And everybody now knows about the big garbage patch in the Pacific Ocean and in other oceans. I mean, even in the 50s and 60s, Jacques Cousteau raised attention to the ocean pollution. And we haven't done much about it at all. So I think one of the things that has changed is, on a positive level, is that people are talking about sustainability. Finally, we have to live and be sustainable. And yet, what does that really mean? We're not going to be purists. We all probably do drive a car. And even if we take mass transit, it's using some sort of fuel. I did once ride my bicycle from Los Angeles to Santa Ana, 50 miles, but it took all day. You can't do this on a daily basis and work and do that. So we have to have transit systems. We have to have areas of sustainability that are in balance. And even organic food is not necessarily safe. It may still be grown in a non-regenerative way. We haven't really adopted regenerative agriculture. That's a major area that we still need to address. And of course, one of the things that started me on environmental issues was the anti-war and the napalm that was being dropped in Vietnam. And the pollution, I could say that war is the ultimate pollution. And we have wars all over this planet, whether or not it's Ukraine or Gaza or Sudan or Myanmar, all over. And war is destroying people, plants, animals, and the land. So we have to really connect these movements.
Yeah, you said a heck of a lot there. And one thing that I was reflecting on when you're talking about the circle of life and the interconnectedness of everything, it seems like the one species that really doesn't belong, that isn't really needed, is us, right? And yet we're the ones who kind of have this capacity to destroy at great levels. And yet what do we add? All we can do is reduce our harm. We can't really necessarily create balance. We can only sort of try to preserve balance. It's an interesting thing. And when you're talking about there being, 8 billion people and counting, is very scary.
I think that the planet would do fine without human beings. But since I am one, I do want to survive as long as I can. And I think that human beings can survive if we use our brain. And that's the odd part. We have intelligence and it's not being used. And we know today in politics how many lies are thrown out there. And I was an elected official for 16 years. People were throwing lies about me that made no sense whatsoever. And you can't compete with $1 million of your opposition money. So we have to change the way we govern. We have to change the way we live. We have to change our activism. And I hope that people will identify and get involved with one or two environmental organizations, whether or not it's for one animal, whether or not it's for animal rights, whether or not it's wild or domesticated animals for one place, your backyard, what is being built. I'm here right now talking in Idlewild in the San Jacinto Mountains, and I was too young to fight the tramway from Palm Springs up into the wilderness in the San Jacinto Mountains that going to San Jacinto Peak. It should never have been built. It's wonderful, people love it, but they don't realize that it's technology in a wilderness, and there was supposed to be no technology in a wilderness. That's one of those kinds of operations where we have to look and see, what do we really need? What do we not really need? And how can we change our lifestyle? It's taken so long for the building trades to adopt sustainable practices, to use reused material, to even when they tear down a building, use what's called deconstruction and not take all that waste and put it in a landfill, but to reuse it, the boards, the concrete, the windows, the everything. These are not regular occurrences, and they should be. It shouldn't be the exception. It should be the occurrences. And we're not there at all. And I sometimes wonder, why not? When everybody, the young people, definitely care about the environment, but they're not making sure that whatever career they're going into is being handled and functioning right. I remember when I first got elected in 2001, we received a packet of one-sided agenda material that was like this every month. I said, one-sided? Let's go double-sided. And they fought me on it. I finally won. You don't give up. You keep on fighting. And of course, now it's available digitally, which saves some things. But even digital, we have to realize our cell phones use rare earth elements and materials. So it's not always the safest and the best to go digital either. Maybe that old pen and pencil on recycled paper. Or actually, not even recycled paper, canaf paper, hemp paper. I mean, during World War II, they promoted hemp. Hemp was used for parachutes and shoelaces. Our Constitution was written on it, and then it stopped. I mean, it should be legal. Everybody should be growing hemp and using hemp there are 200 kinds of products that can be made out of it. Why are those options available?
Yeah, speaking of smoking the Constitution, is it true that capitalism is at the root of not only the American experience, but I would say the destruction of the planet as well?
I wouldn't say capitalism alone. Every form of economic system right now is destructive. Every form of political system isn't working to our benefit. When I say our, the Earth's benefit. And I recall in the late 80s traveling to the Soviet Union because I was curious what communism was about when you had a central government that could do things. And I was shocked to see the pollution of the oil fields in the Caspian Sea. They had the power to do it cleanly, and they didn't. I went later to Lake Baikal, one of the freshwater deepest lakes on the planet, and the pollution was horrible. And I've been to Africa, Asia, South America, North America, you name it. It doesn't matter. We have to have an environmental green economy, whatever you want to call it. And no country in the world has that. Now, some countries are doing better. Scandinavian countries, when I traveled there, was very good about protecting their environment. But they weren't perfect either.
You've edited the Compendium newsletter since 1972. It's published 6 times a year and covers ecological and humanitarian issues and projects. You've also hosted the radio program Environmental Direction since 1977. It's the longest-running environmental radio show in the country. Could you tell us a little bit about these projects and the larger goals?
I'm pleased to, because I found that as an activist, it's important to communicate to the public the issues. And I found that writing the newsletter, which I started when I founded the Ecology Center of Southern California through the nonprofit group Educational Communications, it focused me. I was putting the information down so that I had a better understanding of what was going on and encouraged people to write letters on this issue or that issue. And then I found that I was a guest on programs, and that was fine. But I said, oh, I could control more if I hosted a program. And I was fortunate to be taken up by one of the commercial stations in the country. They didn't pay me. It's a volunteer effort, but they gave me airtime, technological support in the radio station. And in fact, for 17 years, I was on the #1 commercial radio station in the country out of 9,000 stations. So I was very proud of that. And so I'm still on radio, but now we started our YouTube channel. Like, you have to get into the internet system. But in doing that, I gave people who are doing good activist work a forum to express themselves, to tell people what was going on. And that was critical. So I've done 2,500 radio shows, a new show every week, and I've never missed an air deadline. And then in the 80s, I had a friend who was in TV, and he says, oh, let's start a TV show based on your radio show. Well, you can't do a TV show like that without money every week. So I've only done 600 TV shows since then, and been on about 200 cable stations, except for the 3 specials that were on the PBS systems and Discovery Channel. My second Emmy-nominated special that I didn't mention was Wind Energy for the 90s and Beyond. We were the first to promote wind energy back in the 90s. It's an alternative energy source, and we need to do it. And so what I found with using the media to our advantage, just as you all are doing to get out the message, is so important, because we can reach so many more people and let them know what is going on. And it's been a real pleasure. My biggest pleasure is meeting and talking to these experts who are really doing the work in the field. And sometimes some of the scientists who will spend weeks and months in the field, their names may not be so famous, but what they discover and what they tell us and how they're trying to save the different animals is remarkable. I've totally enjoyed it. I started all my environmental work through the nonprofit, which was founded in 1958, where a group of men and women wanted to do a film about an artist between World War I and World War II, and it actually won an Oscar nomination. So it's available there too. But in 93, I also started really promoting and helped create the term ecotourism. And I've been promoting ecotourism because if you don't help the local people, you can't save the wildlife. If you tell the local people, don't shoot the lion, don't shoot the elephant, don't shoot the rhino, well, what do they get out of it? Well, you have to support their school, their orphanage, their health clinic. And that's what we're doing. We have 2 that we support in Kenya and Tanzania. We send donated supplies over in a container every year. And that's important. So those people can care about their own local environment and get something back. And so that's really important. And so we created that project. And it just seems like there's always another project to create.
With regards to ECONEWS, what are some specific programs that you would recommend us and our viewers getting into watching, and how would we find them?
You can find them on different cable stations, but we are now making a YouTube channel, ECONEWS with Nancy Pearlman. And the programs vary. We've had to take off about 575 of the shows because they were done in the old format, the old TV format, video, and they don't work so well. So now we can only put up the digital ones that are being done. But the important thing to tell is while we can't compete with BBC and Nature and Nova and National Geographic and all those programs because they have money and those camera people sit out there forever, we volunteer our time. We volunteer our time to go and talk to these experts and show these places. And we have volunteers who edit the shows. We have volunteers who are on the shows. Nobody gets paid. The stations have never paid us, but they air the programs. And the programs range from ecotourism, where we went to Malaysia and documented the greenest hotel in Malaysia. 200 ways they took an old hotel and made it green. And they had we went to the greenest hotel, I think, resort on the planet, Jean-Michel Cousteau's resort in Fiji. And it should have gotten a 5-star rating, but it didn't because they refused to put TVs in the rooms. And that's required by 5 stars. But these places, the food that you eat at their restaurants are grown in their own organic garden. And in Fiji, part of your dollars go to reestablishing the mangrove forest that had been destroyed. And you can actually help plant a mangrove tree. And some of your dollars go to the local schools and communities. And we covered the greenest hotel in the Czech Republic, in Prague. And they took us down to their basement where you could see all the machinery recycling their own wastewater into clean water right there on site. And of course, naturally, solar panels and so forth. And then we went and documented so many different kinds of places, whether or not it's from Ireland to Azerbaijan to Turkey to Costa Rica to Kenya. Ethiopia is gorgeous. I wish Ethiopia didn't have a civil war going on because I think everybody should go and see the wonderful, wonderful, beautiful environment. You go to the national parks and all these places. And then one of the shows that was in the old digital fashion, you can't see, but I forgot to mention that our organization also started the Earth Cultures Project, which is an ethnic dance, where we provide ethnic dance programs to schools, retirement homes, groups, whatever. And I danced with 8,000 dancers in Estonia doing the same traditional folk dance. It was an incredible experience. So we documented that. And then my current videographer in 2012-13, because it was New Year, we climbed the highest peak in Africa, 19,336 feet, Mount Kilimanjaro, which is also the highest mountain peak not connected to any other mountain range. And that was an incredible experience to show that eco-adventurers can do it. And I did that when I was 65. So I was very happy and proud that I could show that women and older people can still get out and make an effort and get to the highest peak in Africa. I'm not trying to do every highest peak in the world. It's too snowy in some of those places. We did see the glaciers. The last 2 hours on Kilimanjaro, you have to hike the glaciers. But what was interesting is I had done an EcoNews show in the 90s, in the mid-90s. Didn't climb Kilimanjaro, but we stopped on the road, typical photo stop, and took a picture of Mount Kilimanjaro. When I went back 15 years later, we stopped at the same spot and took a picture of the mountain peak, and half the glaciers are gone. So within that 15-year time frame, I actually have documentation of the glaciers disappearing due to our destruction of the climate. And when we went to Switzerland, they actually have in one of the villages where you can hike into the Alps, a trail where they have pictures showing you where the huts were 100 years ago and where they are now, because the glaciers have receded. Because the glaciers have receded, they had to move the huts. And the town below, because the glaciers are melting, they've had to move the people at the base because they would be flooded. So it's really interesting when you go back to some of these places and you can see what's going on. There's no question that we are destroying the planet with the climate change. So ECONEWS, we have a whole range of stories from cultural and natural history, and it's really exciting to go to these places and to see these places. If you can't travel there, watch the shows.
So, Nancy, what do you see as the future of Earth Day and environmentalism?
I see the future of Earth Day as a continuing awareness of the public to our ecological crisis. I would hope that the commercialization might be minimized and that people would be willing to speak up for the real issues that need to be addressed, the real actions that need to be taken, the real protests that need to be done. The first Earth Day, I organized 1,000 bicyclists on Wilshire Boulevard in Los Angeles without a parade permit, because bicycles are considered transportation and vehicles. And as long as you follow the vehicle laws and rules, we stopped at the stop lights, we stopped at the stop signs, but we traveled on Wilshire to bring attention to the problem of automobiles is way too polluting. Other places in Earth Day would bury a car. We did the bicycle ride. You won't recognize me in the picture on the front of LA Times, which I was, because I was wearing an old-fashioned World War II smog mask. Maybe I should have taken it off for the picture, but I didn't know they were taking the picture. We have the internet. We have social media. The focus is going to be more difficult because we have so many people claiming that they understand the ecological issues and they're promoting the wrong thing. So we have to be aware. We have to keep our guard up. We have to do more research. We have to do more protests. We have to do more cleanup. We have to do more testifying. I mean, they're still ready to round up the wild horses. We thought we saved them when we got the Wild Horse and Burro Act passed, that our wild horses on our public land would not be killed. And yet they are doing it right now as we speak. So some of the issues, we were successful. I recall when I first got involved, before Earth Day, I actually joined an organization to save the Tule elk. This is the smallest elk species in the world, found originally in the Owens Valley. And as we all know, most of the Owens Valley was taken and bought by the city of Los Angeles to take their water. And so there went the Tules, there went the Tule elk. There were about 22 species left. And my ex-mother-in-law actually saved them by going and testifying at Congress and getting a national wildlife refuge established in the Owens Valley. So the population went over 2,000. Now they're up in Point Reyes. So it shows what one individual can do, organizing other individuals. And I could tell you story after story like that of different people that I've worked with over the years to save this animal or that species or that ecosystem. We don't have the time, I wish, but it's ongoing. And so what do I see as the future? I see that environmentalism is not going to disappear. The ecological crisis is not going to go away. We have to continue to do this. And I thank you so very much for giving me the opportunity to share some of my experiences. And we'll just have to do this each Earth Day, even in between Earth Days.
Thank you so much, Nancy, for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
And to our audience, now back to your regularly scheduled lives.
Amusing Jews is here to amuse you. If you like being amused, go ahead and click like and subscribe. Enjoying the show? Click like and subscribe.